ultimately be.
Turn the tables in Manitoba's child welfare crisis.
To take that risk because of what we believe in.
The sentence comes down for anti-pipeline protesters who chained themselves to Line 9. And idle no more. Rallies again in Toronto. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. The Manitoba government is continuing its push to reform the child welfare system in the province. In October, Premier Brian Pallister announced Manitoba's Child and Family Services system would undergo a complete overhaul. Now the province has created a committee of community experts to review the current child welfare legislation. Brittany Hobson brings us more.
The Manitoba government has enlisted a new committee to help reduce the staggering number of kids in care. The 7-person committee will work with various groups to review the 2 current child welfare policies in place. According to the province, it's been about 15 years since the acts have been reviewed. Committee member and local activist Michael Redhead Champagne says tackling the system won't be easy.
I see many barriers to where we want our families and our communities to ultimately be. It's actually an extremely daunting task.
Manitoba has made headlines for what some call a crisis when it comes to child welfare. There are about 11,000 kids in care, with 90% of them being Indigenous. In October, the province announced a complete overhaul to the child welfare system. Part of the plan includes a community-based prevention model, which would see more involvement from grassroots organizations.
Providing a bit more flexibility to agencies that deliver the services on behalf of the government, and that will allow them to invest, make further investments in early intervention and prevention.
The committee includes representatives from 3 major Indigenous groups: the Southern Chiefs Organization, Manitoba Kiiwetinoong Okanagan, and the Manitoba Métis Federation. The Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs has previously criticized the overhaul for not being Indigenous-led. Champagne says the government must take a step back from the process and let advocates share their expertise.
And what we really need is people that are affected by child and family services and people that have an understanding of what needs to change to come forward and help us as a committee to identify what those specific legislative changes are so that we can put together a report that is not going to sit on a shelf.
The committee is supposed to report back in early spring with recommendations on how to improve the child welfare system. Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Good news for a Calgary hairstylist who travels around the city giving free haircuts to the homeless. Recently, her bus was vandalized and she received threats. But now some people have come together to help her. Tamara Pimentel has the story.
This is our washing station.
Care Cuts will be up and running in time for the holidays. Misty Wynn Shingoose, an Indigenous hairstylist and founder of Care Cuts, is on the final stages of having this mobile studio ready to park on downtown Calgary streets and give free haircuts to those in need.
It's set up very bare bones right now, just to serve its purpose on Sunday for Care Cuts Christmas. And then after that, we'll be building things like counters and cupboards in order to store things.
Earlier in the month, Shingoose wasn't sure if she would be ready for Christmas. She had been working to get this bus going when she hit a few bumps on the road. The bus had been towed and spray painted on. It also led to this letter Shingoose found on her front lawn that contained racist comments and threatening her life. The attacks made local news. Then, donations for the bus repairs poured in through a GoFundMe page. $3,000 had been raised.
I was honestly blown away. It was the hugest blessing, and it just goes to show you that no matter what troubles are going on in your life, and no matter how hard it seems like the world's trying to get you down, God uses it as blessings for you eventually. Just weather the storm and keep the faith and have that good spirit and belief that all things work for the good in life, and dreams come true.
With little time left before Christmas, Shingoose bought a new bus. Easter Seals Camp Horizon sold it to her 50% off. She paid $500 out of her own pocket. The bus has 4 cutting stations and 1 washing station. There will also be clothing and toiletry donations with a barbecue.
I'm super excited to go back downtown and serve those in need. I'm really excited that we also have the option in this bus now to have a wheelchair lift. So I have actually served clientele downtown who have been had accessibility issues. And so having a wheelchair lift for them to get into our new bus is just like super ecstatic for me.
Care cuts will hit downtown Calgary this weekend and on Christmas Day. Shingu says it will also be a regular service to those in need in the new year. Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Calgary.
Some great news, and we'd like to hear what you have to say about this or any other story. Here's how to contact us. Send an email to news@aptn.ca, like our APTN National News Facebook page. Follow us on Twitter @APTN News, or go to our website, aptnnews.ca. The grassroots movement known as Idle No More swept across Canada 5 years ago. That movement is still alive today, especially in downtown Toronto, where APTN's Beverly Andrews caught up with the action.
The 5th anniversary of Idle No More started out with about a few dozen people at 25 St. Clair Street. They marched down Yonge Street to Dundas Square, where they closed off the intersection of Yonge and Dundas for about 40 minutes, which is one of the busy intersections in Toronto. They closed the intersection down for about 45 minutes. They played several songs. We had people from BC, from Halifax here showing support. We had youth travel from Winnipeg so that they could have their voice, and we did a song to honor them as well. Many of the non-Indigenous people who were here were very supportive and understanding and curious to know what was going on. After they were done outside, the group did a flash mob inside the Eaton Centre and closed off the bottom portion of that mall for about 25 minutes while they did several songs and danced, and a lot of people who were just shopping actually joined in. And going forward, they hope to continue doing the grassroots work and hope that everyone can come out and show their support in whatever community that they're in. Beverly Andrews, APTN National News, Toronto.
2 people convicted after chaining themselves to the Line 9 gas line 2 years ago have received their sentence. More on that after the break.
Hello, I'm Todd Lamoran, and coming up on tonight's Nation to Nation, it's been almost exactly 5 years since Idle No More got started on the prairies. I'll be talking to Sheila McLean, one of the 4 women credited with founding the movement, as well.
Here's a look at Friday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. Sunny and -11 in Fredericton, -9 in Charlottetown, -24 in Inukjuak, sunny and -22 in La Grande. The sun's out in Chibougamau with a high of -21, 18 below in Saguenay. A gray day in southern Ontario, -12 in Ottawa, -11 for North Bay, -13 in Kapuskasing, Big Trout Lake, and Sioux Lookout. Another frosty day in Churchill, -26, 21 below in Thompson. Snow and -13 in Barons River, sunny and -14 in Brandon and Dauphin. Plenty of sun across southern Saskatchewan, -12 in Estevan, -13 in Yorkton, 24 below in Stony Rapids, -22 in Uranium City.
Welcome back. A judge in Quebec compared 2 men convicted of chaining themselves to a pipeline in 2015 to terrorists responsible for killing more than 130 people in 2 different incidents. The ruling against the 2 men came out this week. Danielle Rochette reports.
2 years ago, a young man turned off the valve of the section of the Enbridge Line 9B pipeline, a 40-year-old pipeline bringing crude oil from Western Canada to Montreal. They locked themselves to the fence and the wheel of the valve for 10 hours before they were arrested by the Quebec Provincial Police. After 2 years of uncertainty, Anton William Weckert and Frédéric Brabant received their sentence, which was through a plea deal with the lawyers.
3 years probation, 240 hours of community service, $750 mandatory donation to a charitable organization, and 3 years not participating in demonstrations against Enbridge.
Just before giving the sentence on December 18th at the Valleyfield courthouse, Judge Richard Marleau warned the two activists in these terms. You were convinced that it was correct. However, the terrorists who placed bombs during the Boston Marathon or the Bataclan shooters were convinced that they were doing the right thing. But that was not the case. Frédéric Brabant was quite surprised by the judge's comments and such comparison.
J'ai trouvé ça vraiment aberrant qui compare ça à des attentats terroristes violents qui ont causé des morts, des blessés.
Rickard said it could have been a lot worse if they had been charged under Bill 51, an anti-terrorist legislation introduced by the Harper government in 2015.
We were prepared to be charged, with terrorism. We were willing to take that risk because of what we believed in. And so I think that, it's not going to be fun having, probation officer meetings, whatever, but, in every sense of the word, it was worth it, and I'd do it again.
Asked about their comments on the sentence, Enbridge sent this following statement: "It's criminal activity. It's both reckless and dangerous. We support the prosecution of unlawful activity." This week's sentencing and comments will likely force thousands of environmentalist activists protecting water in North America to reflect on the price to pay should they get caught. Daniel Rochette, APTN National News, Montreal.
As part of the U.S. tax reform, Congress has voted in favor to drill for oil in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. It's an area that has been protected for the last 40 years and is sacred to the Gwich'in people. Shirley McLean reports.
The tax and jobs bill is touted to shrink taxes for American companies and drive millions back into the U.S. economy.
They never got ANWR, but we got ANWR in this bill.
And tucked into the bill is a section to open up the Alaska National Wild Refuge on Alaska's North Slope to oil drilling.
It's a sad day for the Gwich'in people, for sure.
Lorraine Nitro is with the Gwich'in Steering Committee, a pan-northern board that was formed in 1988 to combat oil drilling proposals.
And we're never going to give up fighting for our human rights to live our traditional and cultural way of life as Gwich'in people.
The Gwich'in referred to the National Refuge as a sacred place where life begins. It's the calving grounds for the porcupine caribou herd, a herd that has shaped the Gwich'in Nation for generations.
The Gwich'in are tied to the caribou, and our fates are intertwined.
Jeffrey Peter was in Washington earlier this month to lobby against the bill. He says his people have evolved alongside the caribou. Peter says he'll be a father soon, and he will fight for the right to pass that culture on.
I want the right to be able to pass that knowledge, those traditions, those hunting techniques down to my children and my grandchildren, and I don't want all that to stop now and lose thousands of years of knowledge and values and respect.
Nitro says the Gwich'in have a solid foundation of support in Washington.
We call them our Arctic warriors, and they have stood with us for the last 30 years, and their commitment is just unbelievable. And that's where I place my hope and faith. And our people will continue to travel to Washington, D.C. This is not going to end here.
It's estimated there is 11.8 billion barrels of oil in the refuge, but drilling may still be years away as there will be environmental reviews and likely lawsuits.
The shovel is not going to hit the ground anytime soon. So yes, we do have some options. We're very optimistic, and there's going to be no drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge anytime soon. We are going to stand our ground as Gwich'in people.
Shirley McLean, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Justice Frank Morocco of the Ontario Superior Court came under fire this week over his decision on the Corrections and Conditional Release Act, which allow a warden to order solitary confinement. Senator Kim Pate is a longtime advocate for women in prison. She joins us in Ottawa. Senator Pate, thanks for taking the time to join us. Can you tell us about what this case was and how you feel it was a missed opportunity for Canada?
Well, the case was to challenge the use of solitary confinement in Canadian prison systems. And it was an opportunity really to challenge and put Canada in leadership position, not just here, but around the world. Because the United Nations has found that the use of segregation, which started as a progressive policy or approach more than 200 years ago, now, if it's more than 15 days, is considered torture. Now, the UN develops those standards based on what happens internationally in a number of different countries. So presumably Canada should be far better than that. And so we feel, although the judge found that the manner in which the Correctional Service of Canada makes decisions about who's in segregation and how long and the conditions is something that violates the law, he did not go so far as to say it should be limited or, in fact, eliminated, and I think that's a missed opportunity.
Senator, what do you think this means for prisoners?
Well, I think one of the things it means is that Correctional Service of Canada will have to put in place mechanisms to ensure that there are reviews that are in place. However, it doesn't fundamentally change who's in segregation or for how long necessarily, because as we know from their use of independent chairpeople in other areas, for instance in charging or disciplinary court, it's largely dependent on who they pick to do those jobs. And if they pick someone who is, or if they delegate it to someone else within the prison system, then it means the decision making can still be very biased. So I think it's a very much a missed opportunity. And as Ashley Smith's mom has said, when it comes more than 4 years, just a few days ago, it was the 4th anniversary of the jury into the inquest into the death of Ashley Smith, issuing recommendations recommending the elimination of solitary confinement and segregation, especially for those with mental health issues. It's very much a missed opportunity, and sadly we should and could be doing better, and it's part of the reason that we're hoping that in fact future courts, whether it's the BC court, will actually go further even than the recommendations that have been put forward to it, recognizing how important it is to actually eliminate this process.
Senator, we're tight on time here, but what happens next?
Well, what happens next is we don't know yet whether the Correctional Service of Canada will appeal this decision. If they appeal it, whether in fact the Canadian Civil Liberties will go, continue on as well. Our hope would be that if it is appealed, that it might be even appealed by Canadian Civil Liberties to take it the next step. Because really what we should be looking at is an elimination of the use of segregation. It's a process that's considered torture after a certain amount of time. And I think the judge, although he recognized that people can have very damaging lifelong effects after only a matter of hours or days, didn't go to the next step and understand that this is actually, according to our charter, cruel and unusual punishment.
Senator, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us and speak with us about this.
No, thank you very much. Take care and happy holidays.
Time for a quick break, and then we'll continue our look at the biggest stories of the year. Stick around.
Here's the rest of Friday's weather forecast, picking up in northern Alberta, -9 in Peace River, Grand Prairie, and Fort McMurray, 10 below in Red Deer, Medicine Hat, and Lethbridge. On the west coast, a few temps above 0, 5 in Tofino and Victoria, +5 as well in Sands Pit, +1 under the sun in Prince Rupert. Not so lucky in Yukon, where things return to seasonal on Friday, -25 in Beaver Creek. The mild weather continues in some parts of NWT, -2 in Wrigley and Norman Wells, sunny, and -23 in Sax Harbor, -2 with snow in Tuktoyaktuk. Another frosty day in Nunavut, -20 in Repulse Bay, -33 in Cambridge Bay, -32 under the sun in Tallyoak, 34 below on Friday in Joe Haven.
Welcome back. It's a city in crisis With the police service and police board under investigation, a police chief and mayor facing charges. The happenings in Thunder Bay of the past year made it our #2 story of 2017.
2017 started off in a violent way in Thunder Bay. In the wee hours of January 28th, a trailer hitch was thrown from a moving vehicle, hitting Barbara Kentner as she and her sister Melissa walked down a city street.
I seen the guy hanging outside the car window like that.
Like what, sorry?
Like he was hanging outside the car window like this. I didn't really think anything of it. And then I heard him say, "Oh, I got one of them," and he's laughing away.
18-year-old Braden Bushby was charged with aggravated assault. Kentner suffered internal injuries and passed away in July. The charges against Bushby have now been upgraded to second-degree murder. The incident sparked a conversation on racism in Thunder Bay.
Racism is everywhere in Thunder Bay. It's at the hospital, it's like within the police, it's within even schools, like high schools. It's within everywhere, it's in your everyday life.
A report released by Statistics Canada found Thunder Bay was the leading city for hate crimes reported to police in 2015. On May 6th, 2 First Nations youth went missing. Eventually, the bodies of 14-year-old Josiah Begg and 17-year-old Tammy Kiash would be pulled from a city waterway. This just months after an inquest into the deaths of 7 First Nations students who also died under similar circumstances. The increasing number of river deaths have people asking questions. First Nations leaders, including Anishinaabe Nation and Grand Council Treaty 3, have requested the RCMP take over the death investigations. The Thunder Bay Police Service and its board are both being investigated in a systemic review of how it polices Indigenous people in the city. Senator Murray Sinclair is heading up that investigation, and his report will be released in August 2018. Thunder Bay's police chief is facing charges of breach of trust and obstruction of justice for an unrelated incident. A verdict in that case is expected on January 25th. The city's mayor, his wife, and another city resident are also facing charges. Investigative reporter Tanya Talega, whose book 7 Fallen Feathers looks into the deaths of the 7 First Nations youth who died while attending school in Thunder Bay, said in an episode of Face to Face, the issue is bigger than just one city.
It is a Thunder Bay problem. It's a Canada problem as well. I mean, you could look at stories across Canada. You could look at Colton Bushy. You can look at murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. The same things are heard of over and over again. Concerns aren't taken seriously when Indigenous people call the police. There are communications issues. Nobody calls them back. Coroners don't phone them back, and that's not just a Thunder Bay problem. That's a problem across the country.
At its last meeting of 2017, the Thunder Bay Police Board swore in a new member, an Indigenous lawyer, bringing some hope after a year of challenging times for the city and police.
That's your APTN National News for tonight. Todd Lamoran's next with Nation to Nation. I'm Dennis Ward. We'll see you back here tomorrow.